I used to think the worst pain a man could feel was losing someone. But I was wrong. Sometimes, the deepest pain is finding out that what you had was never really yours. My name is David Monroe. I'm 38. I write code for a living, spend Sundays fixing up my '89 Mustang, and before everything fell apart, I thought I had a quiet, honest life. I met Rachel when I was 30. She was 2 years younger, worked in public health, had a laugh that could cut through any silence. We met at a friend's barbecue. I brought ribs, she brought wine, and we never really stopped talking after that. 2 years later, we got married under a cedar tree in her parents' backyard in Ashland, Oregon. Simple, homemade vows. Her dad cried more than she did. We didn't need big crowds, just each other. Lily came into our lives 3 years into the marriage. Rachel called me at work, barely able to speak through the tears. I drove home going 20 over the limit. That night, she laid my hand on her belly and whispered, "We're not just us anymore." From the moment I first held Lily, I was hooked. That tiny, pink face with a wild tuft of hair and a cry that pierced through my chest. My world realigned. I wasn't just a man anymore, I was a dad. Our house was filled with laughter, bedtime songs, piles of Legos. I became the guy who packed lunches with smiley face notes, who stayed up assembling dollhouses on Christmas Eve. We were that family. People at church always said, "You three belong in a photo frame." But lately, Rachel had been different, distant, like she was always somewhere else when I talked to her. I chalked it up to stress, work, life. I didn't know the truth was waiting just beneath the surface, and it was about to rip my world apart. It crept in like fog, quiet, slow, and impossible to ignore once it surrounded you. Rachel started waking earlier than usual. She'd sit at the edge of the bed in silence, just staring out the window at the trees behind our house. I'd reach for her, half asleep, and she'd pull away gently, whispering, "Didn't mean to wake you." Then she'd be gone, coffee brewed, makeup on, out the door before I could say much. At first, I thought maybe it was just burnout. Her job at the health clinic could be brutal, endless patience, emotional drain. But something about her silence felt heavier than exhaustion. Then came the way she looked at Lily. One night, Lily came home from school with a drawing. It was of the three of us, stick figures, smiling under a bright orange sun. She handed it to Rachel and said, "Look, I gave Daddy your smile." Rachel froze for a second too long. Her smile came late, tight. "She did, huh?" she said, then stood and busied herself with the dishes. I told myself I was overthinking, but the unease didn't leave. One Saturday, I found Rachel alone in the garage, looking through an old box labeled Lily Newborn. I peeked in. Ultrasounds, tiny socks, the hospital wristbands. She was holding the discharge papers, her thumb resting on a section I hadn't noticed before, blood type, AB+. My stomach sank. "Mine's O, Rachel's A." I said nothing. I Googled the combinations later, quietly, in the bathroom with the door locked. The results stared back like a punch in the chest. It wasn't possible. Not mathematically. Not biologically. But instead of confronting her, I slammed the laptop shut. I told myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe the paperwork was wrong. Maybe I just didn't remember my high school biology. But in my gut, a storm was forming. I didn't plan to do it. I wasn't trying to prove anything. It was a Saturday morning, cloudy, the kind where Oregon skies feel like wet concrete pressing down on your chest. Rachel was out running errands. Lily was watching cartoons in her pajamas, legs crossed, cereal in hand. She looked so peaceful, innocent. I looked at her, really looked, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. I opened a drawer in my desk, pulled out one of those ancestry test kits I'd ordered last Christmas and forgotten about. It was supposed to be a fun family project, something to connect us to our roots. But I never sent them in. Until now. Lily giggled at the TV as I gently swabbed her cheek. "What are you doing, Daddy?" "Just something for school," I lied, kissing her forehead. I mailed the kit Monday, and for the next 2 weeks, I barely slept. I stared at my inbox like it was a bomb about to go off. Rachel went about her days like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't look at her without wondering who she really was. Then the email came. I remember exactly where I was, sitting at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold. I opened the report, line after line of percentages and markers, until I found it. Parent match, 0%. You are not the biological father. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. My ears rang. My vision blurred. The room tilted, like I was falling through the floor but hadn't hit the bottom yet. 7 years. Diaper changes. Night feedings. First steps. First words. Every scraped knee, every Christmas morning, every single, "I love you, Daddy." And none of it was mine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stopped. The life I had wasn't real. The love I gave built on a lie. And the woman I trusted most, she had buried the truth beneath my feet. She came home that night carrying groceries, humming like nothing had changed. Like the world hadn't tilted. Like I hadn't just had my heart ripped from my chest. "Hey babe," she called out, kicking off her shoes. "Lily's upstairs?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "She's in her room." Rachel looked at me, paused. Her eyes flicked to the table, where the printed DNA report sat like a weapon. She stopped mid-step. "What is that?" she asked, but her voice already knew. I didn't answer, just looked at her. The silence between us grew loud, so loud it felt like the walls would crack. "I did the test," I said. "Lily's not mine." Her breath hitched. She didn't move, just stood there, eyes wide, face draining of color. "David." "I can explain." "Explain," I said, standing now, the chair scraping back. 7 years, Rachel. 7. You let me raise her, love her, devote my entire soul to her, knowing she wasn't mine. Tears welled in her eyes. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like drywood. I didn't know for sure. Not at first. My fists clenched. "You cheated on me?" She looked down, nodded once. "With who?" She hesitated. "Someone I knew before you. It was a mistake. It happened once, right before I found out I was pregnant." I stared at her like I didn't know this woman. Maybe I didn't. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. "But then you held her, and you were perfect. And I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you'd leave. That you'd hate her. That you'd hate me." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I sat down, hard, like my legs finally gave out. "I don't hate her," I said quietly. "But I don't even know what she is to me now." Rachel collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. But I couldn't touch her. For the first time in our marriage, I felt completely, irreversibly alone. The days after felt like walking underwater. Everything slowed down. Voices were muffled. Colors dulled. I'd sit on the edge of Lily's bed at night, watching her breathe, wondering how I was supposed to keep pretending. Her stuffed animals lined the wall like little soldiers. Her nightlight glowed purple. She always wanted it on, even now at 7. She had no idea her world was on fire. I started seeing our memories differently. They used to bring me peace. Now, they haunted me. Her first steps. I remember Rachel shouting, "She's doing it, David," and me catching Lily before she fell. Her little feet slapping against the hardwood. I thought I saw myself in her determination. I didn't. I didn't see myself in her at all anymore. I barely slept. My brain played a highlight reel on loop. Lily calling me daddy, her tiny hand in mine, her laughter echoing down the hallway. All of it laced with a lie. Every smile I gave her now felt stolen. Every hug, borrowed time. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't want pity. I didn't want judgment. I wanted to rewind time, just 1 year, just 1 month, just before the test. Before I knew. Before I broke. Rachel tried to speak to me. I wouldn't listen. I couldn't. Every word from her mouth felt tainted. "I'm sorry," she whispered one night, standing at the door as I sat in the dark. "I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was grieving someone who wasn't dead. Grieving a version of my life that never existed. And the worst part? I still loved Lily. More than anything. And I didn't know what the hell to do with that. I started driving at night. No destination. Just the hum of the engine and the emptiness of the road. Sometimes I'd end up by the lake on the north side of town, sitting on the hood of my car with a thermos of lukewarm coffee, staring at my reflection in the black water. I wasn't looking for peace. I was looking for understanding, for logic, for anything that would make this make sense. I talked to no one. Not my brother, not my parents. What could I even say? "Hey, remember that beautiful little girl I've raised for 7 years?" Not mine. No one prepares you for this. There's no manual for emotional identity theft. One night, I searched for her biological father. I didn't know his name, but I knew Rachel's past well enough to make guesses. I found someone, Mike Keller. They dated briefly before me. He lived 2 towns over. Had a public Facebook page. I clicked through his photos. One hit me like a hammer. His daughter. From a different relationship. Same green eyes as Lily. Same crooked smile. I closed the laptop, heart thudding. I wanted to reach out. I didn't. Instead, I met with a counselor. I sat across from her and said nothing for 20 minutes. She waited. I don't know who I am anymore, I finally said. I don't know what I am to my daughter. She nodded gently. But do you love her? Of course I do. I snapped. That's the problem. She smiled softly. Then maybe that's still who you are. But love didn't feel simple anymore. It felt like a battlefield between my heart and my pride. And I didn't know which side deserved to win. The house felt too small, too loud with silence. Every creak of the floorboard was a reminder that nothing was the same. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun slicing through the blinds in harsh lines across the counter. Lily was upstairs, humming a song I'd taught her last Christmas. Rachel was gone, said she needed space, but I wasn't sure if she meant for me or herself. I stared at my hands, bruised by years of work and worry. I was at a crossroads. Part of me wanted to run, to pack a bag, leave the house, and disappear into the night. Start fresh, somewhere no one knew my name or my pain. But another part of me fought to stay, to fight for what I thought was family, to hold on to the little girl who called me dad with such unguarded love. I kept asking myself, can I forgive? Can I heal? Can I rebuild trust on this cracked foundation? I thought about Lily's smile, the way it lit up even my darkest days. How could I just walk away from that? But then I remembered Rachel's fear. The fear that stopped her from telling me sooner. The fear that destroyed us. I felt torn between anger and compassion. Between wanting to protect myself and wanting to protect her. That morning, I made no promises. I simply chose to wait, to see if time could teach me the answer. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight inside ourselves. The rain hammered relentlessly against the window panes, drumming a mournful rhythm that echoed the turmoil inside my chest. It was the kind of storm that seemed to wash the world clean, but left the soul drenched and raw. Rachel's voice came through the phone, fragile and broken, like a fragile thread barely holding together the weight of years of silence. "David," she whispered, "there's something I need to confess, something I should have told you long ago, but couldn't find the courage to say. Before Mike, before you were part of my life, there was someone else. A man I hardly knew, a shadow from a time I hoped was buried forever." My grip tightened on the receiver until my knuckles ached. Another secret. Another crack in the fragile glass of our lives. I fought the panic rising in my throat, the rapid hammering of my heart that threatened to drown out her words. "I need to find him," she continued, voice trembling like a fragile flame in the wind. "For Lily's sake, and for mine. I need to know who she really is, to understand what's inside her blood and soul." The ground beneath me shifted. The foundation I thought we had carefully built was now crumbling faster than I could imagine. And yet, amidst the chaos and betrayal, a strange, desperate hope flickered deep within my chest. Maybe this truth, however brutal, was the key to understanding, to healing. Or maybe it was the final blow that would shatter everything beyond repair. For the first time in years, I questioned whether the love we'd shared was strong enough to survive the ghosts of the past. Could confronting the darkest secrets finally mend the wounds? Or would it rip the fragile fabric of our family apart forever? The silence on the other end of the line felt like the eye of the storm. I didn't have answers. I only knew that the path ahead was uncertain, littered with painful truths and impossible choices. The weight of Rachel's confession settled over me like a suffocating fog, thick and unrelenting. Nights stretched endlessly, filled with restless tossing and turning, my mind spinning through every memory, every whispered promise, every laugh shared with Lily, now tinged with bitter uncertainty. I sat alone in the dim glow of the living room, shadows dancing on the walls, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The envelope Rachel handed me at the coffee shop felt heavier than any burden I'd carried before. Inside, faded letters, text messages, and blurred photographs hinted at a life she kept hidden, not out of malice, but out of fear and desperation. The name Jacob echoed in my mind, unfamiliar yet haunting, like a ghost in our fractured story. Why hadn't she told me sooner? The question clawed at my chest, each heartbeat a reminder of the trust that had been broken. But beneath the anger and betrayal, there was something else, a fragile thread of understanding. Rachel wasn't perfect. Neither was I. We were flawed, broken people caught in a storm not of our own making. The days blurred into one another as I tried to piece together the truth. Conversations with friends, late-night internet searches, and quiet reflections all failed to soothe the ache inside. I was desperate for answers, yet terrified of what I might find. Would Jacob even acknowledge Lily? Would he care? And most painfully, would this revelation change how I saw the little girl who called me Dad? One evening, staring out at the rain-soaked streets, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could walk away, protect myself from further heartbreak and betrayal, or I could fight. Fight for Lily, for Rachel, for the family I wanted to believe in. The choice wasn't simple. It was a war waging inside me, between anger and love, between fear and hope. That night, I made no promises. I simply chose to stay, to face the unknown, to weather the storm, and to find whatever truth lay hidden in the shadows. The kitchen was silent but heavy, the weight of all our unspoken words hanging thick between us. Rachel and I sat across from each other at the worn wooden table, the same table that had held our family dinners, birthdays, and whispered dreams. Tonight, it bore witness to a different kind of reckoning. The shadows from the dim overhead light danced across her tear-streaked face, revealing a vulnerability I had never seen before. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said quietly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "But I don't want to lose you. Or Lily." Her trembling lips parted, tears spilling freely as she nodded. "I never wanted to hurt you, David. I thought keeping the secret would protect us, but I was wrong. I was selfish." We talked for hours, peeling back layers of guilt, fear, and regret. She told me about the nights she cried herself to sleep, haunted by the lies. I shared my own pain, the nights I lay awake replaying moments that now felt like betrayals. "I need honesty," I said finally, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "No more secrets. If we're going to try again, it has to be with truth." She agreed, promising a new beginning built on transparency. The scars we carried would take time to heal, maybe years, but in that fragile space between heartbreak and hope, we found something rare, a flicker of peace. Closure wasn't about forgetting the cracks, but learning to live with them and build something stronger. It was a beginning, not the story we dreamed of, but the one we had to create. The days after our fragile reconciliation stretched ahead like an uncertain horizon. The house, once filled with the steady rhythm of daily life, now felt different, quieter, but not empty. Rachel and I moved carefully around each other, still learning how to navigate the fractures between us. Every glance, every word was weighted with unspoken fears and tentative hope. I found myself waking earlier than usual, drawn outside to the cool Oregon air. The crisp mornings became my refuge, a place to breathe away from the tangled emotions inside. I watched the sun break over the hills, painting the world in gold and shadow, a reminder that even after the darkest nights, light could return. Rachel threw herself into her work and her care for Lily, but there was a new honesty between us. We didn't pretend that everything was perfect. Instead, we embraced the messiness of rebuilding. Therapy sessions, long talks, and quiet moments of reflection slowly stitched together the frayed edges of our family. Lily remained the heart of it all. Her laughter, still bright and pure, was both a balm and a challenge. Sometimes I caught myself looking at her with new eyes, questioning, uncertain, but fiercely protective. She was more than a symbol of the past's mistakes. She was our shared future, fragile and precious. There were moments when the weight of the past threatened to drag me under, memories of betrayal, doubt, and loss clawing at my resolve. But I held on, reminded by Rachel's quiet strength and Lily's innocent trust. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairy tale I once imagined, but it was real, raw, complicated, and filled with the stubborn hope that sometimes, even broken things can be made whole again. The weight of everything we had endured settled over me like a slow-moving tide, sometimes overwhelming, sometimes barely noticeable. I found myself thinking more and more about what this all meant, not just for Rachel, Lily, or me, but for who I was and who I wanted to become. Love, I realized, was never simple or clean. It was messy and complicated, full of mistakes and forgiveness, betrayal and trust. I learned that pain could carve deep wounds, but it could also carve paths to growth, understanding, and even unexpected grace. I had spent so long trying to hold onto an idea of family that was perfect and whole, but life had shown me otherwise. Families are often broken, fragmented, and imperfect, but that doesn't mean they are any less real or worthy of fighting for. Rachel's courage to tell the truth, even when it was hardest, taught me something vital about vulnerability and strength. And Lily, with her innocent laughter and endless curiosity, reminded me every day that love could be a choice, a commitment we renew even when the road is difficult. I wasn't sure what the future held, and the uncertainty was daunting. But I knew one thing for certain: I would carry these lessons with me, shaping who I am and how I love. I would learn to accept the cracks in the foundation, not as flaws, but as the very things that made our story human and alive. The past was a shadow I could never fully escape, but how I faced it, how I let it change me, was my choice. And in that choice, I found a fragile kind of peace. The sunlight spilled gently through the curtains, casting golden stripes across the worn carpet of Lily's room. I sat quietly on the edge of her bed, watching her peaceful face as she slept. Her small chest rose and fell in a rhythm that felt sacred, soft, steady, innocent. For a moment, everything felt still. No lies, no doubt, just the sound of her breathing and the distant hum of the world waking up. Then, like a sudden gust of wind, a memory rushed in. A summer day, Lily chasing butterflies in the park, Rachel's laughter floating behind her like a melody. I remembered the way she looked at Lily then, with pride, with love, with a secret. I didn't know it at the time, but now every second of that moment replayed with new meaning. Had she known then? Had she already made the choice to keep it from me? The memory wasn't just warm. It stung. What once was joy was now painted in doubt and hidden truths. And yet, even in the ache, there was something beautiful. Because in all the uncertainty, one thing remained true. I loved that little girl with everything in me. I leaned down and kissed Lily's forehead, whispering a silent promise, not to forget the past, but not to let it define us. Some truths hurt. Some flashbacks reopen wounds. But even the hardest memories can remind us why we keep going. The morning came quietly, without drama or fanfare. Just a soft light creeping in through the blinds, warming the walls of a house that had been both a sanctuary and a battlefield. I sat in the living room, the same spot where I had once broken down after the truth came out. But now I was still, not healed completely, no, but still in a way I hadn't been for a long time. Rachel walked in with 2 cups of coffee. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw the same exhaustion that lived in me, but also a shared resilience. We didn't say anything at first. We just sat together, sipping in silence. There was nothing left to scream, nothing left to break. Only space, space for breathing, for remembering, for rebuilding. I had once believed that a single betrayal could erase years of love. That trust, once shattered, could never be reassembled. But life had a way of proving me wrong. It didn't offer clean slates or perfect justice. It gave us time and choices and the possibility of grace. And we had chosen, again and again, to stay. Lily came bounding into the room with a drawing clutched in her hand. "Look, Daddy," she beamed. I froze for just a moment at the word Daddy. It hit me in a way it hadn't in weeks. Not with pain, but with quiet affirmation. I wasn't her father by blood, but I was her father in every way that mattered. And somehow, that was more powerful. She climbed into my lap and I held her, drawing and all, as Rachel leaned against my shoulder. In that fragile moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Love isn't about perfect origins or flawless stories. It's about what we choose to carry and who we choose to carry it with. So here we were, damaged, tested, scarred, but also standing, together, and that was enough. Later that afternoon, I found myself alone in the backyard, watching the wind move through the trees. I remembered planting one of them the day Lily was born. Back then, I had no idea what kind of father I would be. I had only hope and a name I was proud to carry. Now, standing in the shadow of that tree, I understood that fatherhood wasn't just a role. It was a decision repeated 1,000 times in 1,000 quiet ways. The weight of the past hadn't disappeared. It never would. But I had learned to carry it differently. Not as a chain, but as a reminder. A reminder of how fragile love is and how fiercely it must be protected. We don't get to control what breaks us, but we do get to decide what we become because of it. In the weeks that followed, we began building something new. Not the old life we once had, but something more honest, more human. There were still hard conversations, moments of distance, and nights where the silence pressed too hard. But there was also laughter again, shared glances, long walks, and always Lily, our anchor, our storm, our light. I kept a journal during that time. Pages filled with rage, sorrow, hope, and ultimately, gratitude. Because through it all, I found myself again. And I found that even after the deepest betrayal, there can be truth, there can be forgiveness, and there can be love. This is not the story I thought I'd live, but it's mine. And somehow, that makes it beautiful. If this story moved you, if it made you think, remember, or feel something deep, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We share raw, human stories every week. Stories that uncover the truth, the pain, and the beauty inside our lives. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and let us know, have you ever faced a truth that changed everything? Your voice matters here, and your story, just like this one, deserves to be heard. Thanks for watching. Until next time.